Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that's full of high ideals and, well, some pretty harsh realities. Europe is in a massive race towards a green, carbon-neutral future, but we're going to examine the real cost of that transition, a cost that's often paid by communities and ecosystems thousands of miles away on the African continent. There's an old African adage that a Namibian presidential advisor used, and it just perfectly captures the situation here. When the elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled on. It really gets to the heart of this high-stakes geopolitical competition for resources, where local communities, they're the grass, caught right in the middle of a global power struggle. So, Europe's ambition? It's huge, a future powered entirely by clean energy. But here's the thing. That green dream is built on a foundation of raw materials, metals and minerals that are kicking off a new and really intense scramble for Africa's incredible natural wealth.
So what it all boils down to is this fundamental conflict. See, Europe has pretty much stopped this kind of mining on its own soil. It's accepted this sort of global division of labor. The dilemma is that the clean energy goals for one part of the world completely depend on a reality that is often anything but clean and is super high risk for another.
Okay, let's see how this plays out in the real world. Our first case study takes us to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, the DRC is the world's #1 producer of cobalt, a metal that is absolutely essential for the electric car batteries that are supposed to be powering Europe's green mobility revolution. And this is where it gets really complicated. A huge chunk of the DRC's cobalt, maybe up to a quarter of it, comes from these small-scale artisanal mines. We're talking about a massive informal sector that operates in a total legal gray zone, where hundreds of thousands of people are heading down into these barely secured mine shafts every single day. And this slide really shows you the journey that cobalt takes. It starts in a dangerous pit. The miners then hand over what they find to local traders, and these markets are often dominated by Chinese buyers who set these rock-bottom prices. From there, that cobalt gets mixed in with industrially mined material, and you guessed it, eventually ends up in the rechargeable batteries we all use in our phones and cars. And right here, this is the main critique from activists on the ground, like Patricia Kashala. They trace these supply chains and they find that even if European companies try to avoid the unregulated mines directly, the people who end up buying the final products are overwhelmingly in the West. This creates what they see as a really deep hypocrisy. So with all this dependency and, frankly, a lot of growing criticism, Europe is now trying to create a new kind of model. Let's take a look at their flagship project in Namibia. This one isn't about mining, it's about green hydrogen. Okay, so this is Europe's formal answer to China's growing influence. It's a huge strategy they're calling the Global Gateway, and it's designed to offer a more sustainable, more ethical alternative, focused on what they're calling values-based partnerships, instead of just quick transactional deals. And believe me, they are putting some serious money behind this idea. That number, 300 billion euros, shows you just how strategically important these new energy partnerships are for Europe's future, and for reasserting its influence on the continent. And a massive slice of that investment is headed right here to Namibia. The plan is, to put it mildly, ambitious. That $10 billion figure you see, that's nearly the same as the country's entire GDP. The goal is to turn this quiet coastal town called Luderitz into a global hub for green hydrogen, which will then be shipped off to power Europe. But here's the big question. Is this new approach actually seen as a real partnership by the people on the receiving end? Well, as we're about to find out, on the ground in Namibia, the answer is incredibly complicated, and it's really layered with history. Now, this is fascinating. This slide breaks down the local perception, and it comes from a Namibian project leader. He basically says the Chinese approach is direct, it's business, but the European values-based approach, it can come across as condescending, like a savior complex that arrives with a whole long list of conditions and demands. And you just can't escape the history here. The project is planned right near Shark Island, which was the site of a German colonial-era concentration camp where thousands died. This adds this whole other layer of deep, deep tension. Community advocates are worried that this sacred land is once again being developed without their consent.
For a lot of young Namibians, especially in a town where unemployment is over 50%, all these promises of a high-tech future, they sound painfully familiar. They've seen resource booms before, with diamonds, with fish, and they feel like the benefits almost never trickle down to them.
It's leading to some real frustration and a lot of skepticism. And then a local environmentalist asks this really powerful question. The entire project is planned inside a protected national park, which is home to over 1,000 rare species of plants. The question highlights what a lot of people see as a massive double standard, sacrificing African nature for Europe's energy needs. All right, let's move into our final section, because this whole paradox gets even bigger than just green energy. It really reveals a broader, much more complex picture of what Europe needs right now and the contradictions in its own policies. And this is the exact hypocrisy that Namibian officials point to. Ever since the war in Ukraine, Europe's demand for African natural gas has shot through the roof. So at the very same time that Europe is funding these big green projects, it's also sending its own companies to extract the exact fossil fuels it criticizes African nations for developing. You know, the long, tragic history of fossil fuel extraction in Nigeria is just this huge cautionary tale. For decades, billions and billions in oil and gas wealth has just flowed out of the country, and yet, the people living in the resource-rich Niger Delta are facing extreme poverty and a life expectancy that is just shockingly low, only 40 years. And this really gets to the core argument from activists like the Nigerian Nobel laureate Nimobasi. He says that these new energy deals, it doesn't matter if they're for gas or for green minerals, can feel like a direct continuation of those old exploitative patterns, just with a different name. And that right there, that really is the ultimate challenge. It forces all of us to ask a really fundamental question. Can the world's urgent, and I mean urgent, need for a clean energy transition ever be truly reconciled with the principles of fairness and justice for the people and the places that provide the resources?